Tyrion had never been a patient man, nor one to put much stock in the visions and rumors that so often swirled through the taverns, courtyards, and stables of the Seven Kingdoms. The life of a dwarf had taught him quick wits, a sharper tongue, and a healthy suspicion of tall tales. He prided himself on his ability to sniff out a lie, or at least measure the length of the exaggeration. So many nights in the shadow of Casterly Rock, he had grown used to the laughter of men-at-arms behind his back, and the scornful gazes from court ladies who could not stomach the shape of him. Yet even that scorn was more comforting than the creeping sense that he might be the butt of a cosmic joke, something bigger than whispers of bastard blood. He told himself it was just idle talk born of envy or malice. But now, in the hush of a torchlit corridor in King's Landing, listening to Varys murmur certain possibilities, Tyrion felt an awful prickle climb his spine. He wanted to speak, to unleash some glib retort, to ask Varys why he thought it remotely plausible, yet he found his tongue stuck as if glued to the roof of his mouth. His father's words, from long ago, still rang in his ears. Men's lies can be more comforting than the truth. And Tywin Lannister had often confronted Tyrion with his own brand of pitiless truth. Or so Tyrion had believed. Did that memory, that father's contempt, carry weight in the face of this new possibility? "You have his eyes," Varys whispered in that delicate tone he reserved for revelations. Perhaps not so striking in color, but the shape. It does make one wonder. Tyrion forced a laugh. "I have mismatched eyes, Spider. One green, one black-brown. Are you telling me that a Targaryen prince might share my unfortunate asymmetry? You must think me an utter fool." Nebertrand. Varys lifted a hand to hush him. Around them, torches flickered along the corridor. The old stones of the Red Keep pressed in. Tyrion had never liked how dark these halls seemed at night, how the shadows wavered like living things. Any moment he expected to see a Lannister guardsman, or worse yet, Cersei lurking at the next corner. "Not at all," Varys replied. "I think you are one of the smartest men in the realm. That is why I speak to you now. You were always inquisitive, always digging for truths others might leave buried. It's what made you a more interesting hand than so many who came before. I suppose the curiosity is in your blood." "Merci." The soft click of the Master of Whisperers' shoes on the stone floor made Tyrion grit his teeth. He had half a mind to turn and shuffle back to his rooms, pour himself an entire jug of wine, and forget the conversation. But something in Varys' voice snagged him like a fish on a line. He wanted to break free, but he found himself reeled in by the very possibility he'd mocked only moments before. "What do you propose?" Tyrion said at last in a voice that felt too thin. "That my mother was. Joanna Lannister was indeed your mother," Varys said gently. "But a woman can carry more than one secret in her lifetime. As can a man. Your father, or the man you believe to be your father, Lord Tywin, was not known for charity. Nor was the late King Aerys known for restraint. Some histories whisper that he lusted after Joanna Lannister at the time she served as a lady-in-waiting to his sister-wife, Rhaella. And you, my dear Tyrion, were born in suspicious timing and in suspicious circumstances." Nemshim. He had heard half-formed rumors, usually spoken behind closed doors, that the Mad King had once taken improper liberties with Joanna at a tourney or during a feast. Tyrion had dismissed them, as he dismissed most everything, with a wave and a cynical grin. Yet now, faced with Varys' unwavering gaze, he could not so easily wave it off. "And why now, Spider? Why tell me such a thing after I've spent so long dancing to the Lannister tune? Or was I dancing to a Targaryen tune all along? I doubt that." "Down?" Varys stepped closer, and Tyrion caught a faint whiff of lavender and dust from the man's robes. "Because all that was, is no longer. The realm stands on the brink once more. Daenerys Targaryen moves across the sea. Dragons, so they say, have hatched anew in the world. Some claim they have seen them with their own eyes. If the Targaryen line is truly revived, it might please them to know they have allies in the Seven Kingdoms. Or at least, those with Targaryen blood." That, Tyrion reflected grimly, could be a boon or a curse. He recalled how Westeros had so quickly turned on Targaryen heirs after Robert's rebellion. But now, with Joffrey on the throne, a monster in boy's clothing, and with the realm roiling in civil war. Who could predict how hearts and loyalties might shift if a dragon-bearing queen appeared on the horizon? And I suppose, Tyrion said quietly, if any Targaryen or Targaryen claimant tried to seize the throne having a Lannister. Targaryen. Well, that might serve well if they needed to sow confusion or alliances. Varys' smile was the sort of thing Tyrion had grown to detest. It made him feel, in that moment, like a mouse being coaxed along to a certain trap. Who can say? I only suggest that your birthright may be something more than you suspect. If it is so, your life has a rather different shape. The game you have been playing might shift in your favor. If you choose your next moves wisely, you might find a new sort of power. An inheritance beyond what Tywin Lannister's gold could give you. Despite himself, Tyrion's heart pounded. A Targaryen prince? The very notion was so absurd it might reduce him to helpless laughter if Varys had not spoken it with such careful composure. And yet, it rang a chord. An explanation, perhaps, for Tywin's hatred. For the way his father looked at him with that special blend of loathing and fear. It explained things Tyrion had never dared examine. He felt the trembling in his hands as he curled them into fists. And if it's true, Tyrion said, forcing his voice to steady, what would you have me do, Varys? March into the great hall. Declare I am the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. I doubt that will end with me wearing a crown. Then... Varys lifted both palms in a gesture of peace. I have no instructions for you, my lord. Only this knowledge freely given so that you may judge what to do with it. Though if you are wise, you might take steps to confirm what I suspect. There are ways. Family histories, letters, cryptic diaries, ravens gone astray. Sometimes even the blood can speak, if you know how to listen. With that, Varys stepped back, then offered a slight bow. I shall leave you to your thoughts. Good evening, my lord. No. Tyrion watched him drift off, silent as a shadow, leaving behind a swirl of faint perfume. Alone, Tyrion touched a trembling hand to the old stone wall and let out a shaking sigh. For once in his life, words failed him. His father's face filled his mind, cold, grim, always seething with that unspoken bitterness. You are no son of mine, Tyrion recalled. Oh, how often had he heard that thrown in his face when Tywin truly wanted to wound him. He had assumed it meant he was an embarrassment, or that Tywin regretted the day of his birth. But what if... He closed his eyes, tried to calm the thunderous beating of his heart. If it were true, it changed everything. His place in the realm, his place in the world. But was it a gift or a curse? When he pushed himself away from the wall, the hall felt as though it tilted under his feet. The sense of being unmoored was terrifying, yet Tyrion could not deny the surge of possibility that lit a small spark inside him. He would find the truth. The realm might fall apart, or stand on the cusp of a new age. Either way, Tyrion Lannister, Tyrion Targaryen. The notion was too big, could not ignore the path laid before him. Some old locked chest of secrets might await, and he had always been far too curious not to pry it open. In that moment, he promised himself that if the truth led to a nasty surprise, he would find a way to use it. He was, after all, the Impike. The world had given him that name. Why not transform it into something else? He turned on his heel and hurried back toward his chambers, mind buzzing with questions. By the time he pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, he was already planning how to track down every scrap of evidence Varys had hinted at. His lamp had sputtered low, casting dancing shadows, but he lit a candle from the brazier and poured himself a cup of dark arbor red. As the wine settled on his tongue, he found his breath at last. He could almost see the shape of Tywin's sneer in his reflection. Or was it the reflection of the Mad King? He would find out. That very night, Tyrion began writing letters. He penned them quickly, in code. He had learned from his time as Master of Coin, from his dealings with the Gold Cloaks and the Small Council, that secrets unguarded by cipher were no secrets at all. Sometimes his code was a simple letter substitution he'd devised in childhood to keep Jaime from reading his diaries. Other times he employed more elaborate ciphers, learned from borrowed volumes in the Red Keep's library. The hours crept by, and by dawn he had composed 3 letters. One was for Prince Doran Martell and Dorne, for Tyrion suspected the Dornish might hold grudges, but also certain knowledge. The Martells had been entangled with the Targaryens for generations. If any lord might have preserved letters from the late Prince Rhaegar or from King Aerys's days, it would be the Martells. He wrote carefully, hinting that certain histories of the late king's personal entanglements might be of interest, and that Tyrion would be generous in awarding any knowledge. He signed it in a flourish with the false name of a scribe, hoping to maintain secrecy. The second was to the Citadel in Old Town, requesting certain genealogical records. He couched his request in the guise of a Lannister genealogical project, the sort of nonsense a bored noble might sponsor to satisfy family pride. Tyrion doubted the maesters would think it remarkable. He made sure to note he wanted every possible mention of Joanna Lannister's lineage and her time at court. Perhaps, if his mother had journeyed to King's Landing more often than official records suggested, it might show up. Or perhaps not. But it was a start. The third letter, ironically enough, was to Maester Cleon at Casterly Rock, an old man Tyrion remembered from his youth, who had always shown kindness and had a passion for old diaries in the Lannister vault. Tyrion wrote that he wished to add to the genealogical project, specifically focusing on all personal letters or diaries from Lady Joanna, or those close to her around the time of his birth. He invented a plausible reason, something about verifying details for a commissioned tapestry about the day of Tyrion's birth, a vanity project from the new King Joffrey. Lies poured from his quill, quick and neat, but all calculated to retrieve the documents he needed. He sealed all 3 letters with the Lannister signet. He still had the authority to do so, and resolved to have them discreetly handed off by his own men. He had coin enough to bribe ravens and riders. Only once the 3 parcels were entrusted to a black-robed courier under the cover of early dawn did Tyrion slump, exhausted, into a chair. He heard the rustle of bedsheets behind him. Shay, who had been asleep in his bed, stirred awake. She sat up and gave him a curious look. "My lion, you've been awake all night." Tyrion forced a playful smile, that old self-mocking grin he wore like armor. "Matters of state, my sweetling, more boring than you can imagine. It's best you not trouble your pretty head with it. Come here." She left the bed, a soft shift barely clinging to her slim figure, and padded over to him with a sleepy cat-like grace. She draped her arms around his shoulders. "You look worried," she said, pouting a little. "Am I so frightening?" He chuckled, more from habit than true mirth, and let himself sink against her warmth. The last thing he wanted was to speak of Targaryen secrets. He had enough sense to know that Shay, though dear to him in her way, was not the best keeper of confidences. He brushed a hand through her hair and kissed her shoulder. "Nothing a bit of wine and a long sleep won't cure," Tyrion said. He closed his eyes, inhaling her soft scent. For a moment, he allowed himself to forget that the world had changed a few hours ago. Or perhaps it hadn't changed at all, merely he had. "Stay a while, until I drift off. You can sing me a lullaby." "Linderu." Shay giggled, but her expression remained a bit concerned. "As you wish, my lion." He let himself be led back to the bed, trying to quiet the maelstrom of questions in his mind. Yet even as he curled beside Shay, the voice of doubt lingered. If King's Landing discovered that the dwarf was rumored to be a Targaryen, would they kill him out of fear? Or had the seeds already been planted by Varys, so that the rumor might sprout in a more convenient season? He sank into uneasy dreams, and saw flickers of dragon wings in the sky. Days turned into a fortnight as Tyrion waited for replies, occupying himself with the usual tasks of court, smoothing the finances that Joffrey threatened to squander, attending small council meetings with Pycelle droning on, and trying not to throttle the boy king whenever he displayed his cruelty. Through it all, Tyrion felt like an actor performing a play, reciting lines that no longer held meaning. A small, secret voice reminded him that if the Targaryen rumor were true, the entire game might be played differently. Cersei eyed him with growing suspicion. She seemed to sense that Tyrion was up to something. On 3 separate occasions, she cornered him in the corridors or the council chamber, attempting to glean what new scheme he was concocting. He fended her off with sarcasm and pleasantries, but he saw the flicker of frustration in her green eyes. His sister had no shortage of cunning, though it was tinged with paranoia. If she learned that Tyrion might not even be a true Lannister, would she be relieved or enraged? Would she see him as more of a threat? Possibly both. After 2 weeks and 3 days, Tyrion counted them, ironically, as though marking time before an execution. He received the first reply. It came from Old Town. A dusty old raven arrived at dawn, bearing a short letter from the Citadel scribes, listing a collection of documents relevant to the genealogical project. It offered to send them at Tyrion's expense, or he might dispatch a trusted courier to retrieve them. Tyrion read it over breakfast, sipping small beer to wash down his bread, and felt a curious flutter in his stomach. Old Town's response was formal and dull, but that was good. They had no suspicion. He penned a quick acceptance, authorizing the Citadel to send all relevant scrolls. Let them drown him in parchment if they would. He could sift through it later. He had just finished that letter when the next arrived. A man in plain traveler's garb came with a sealed scroll. Tyrion recognized the private crest of Prince Doran. A rush of nerves threatened to undo him, but he forced calm. He read it alone in his chambers, with the door securely bolted, a candle flickering by his elbow. The letter was short, elegantly phrased and cautious. Lord Tyrion, I am intrigued by your inquiry. Certain histories are better left unsaid, but the Martells have long memories. I may have information that could interest you. However, I propose a more secure way to discuss this. Perhaps you might dispatch an envoy to Sunspear. I can promise safe passage and hospitality. Let us speak in person if we are to speak of the late King Aerys's dealings. Signed, Doran of House Martell, Prince of Dorne. Tyrion let out a low whistle. Doran Martell was not the sort of man to make idle invitations. A private meeting in Dorne meant traveling far from King's Landing. It meant leaving behind his position as Master of Coin, and it would certainly raise eyebrows in the capital. But if Doran truly had something, it might be the closest Tyrion would come to proof. Dorne had been close to House Targaryen through Elia Martell, Rhaegar's wife. And, if the rumors about Aerys's fixation on Joanna were more widely known, Dorne might have gleaned them through their ties at court. Still, Tyrion had no illusions. Traveling to Dorne would be risky. Cersei would suspect him of forging alliances. Tywin, if he were still alive. Tyrion nearly laughed to remember that Tywin was indeed gone now, shot by Tyrion's crossbow in that fateful confrontation. That memory still gave him nightmares. But if Tywin had known about this rumor, then, the thought made him shudder. He shook it off. The future was what mattered. Tywin had gone, leaving Tyrion with a monstrous nephew for a king, and a realm on the brink of chaos. Maybe it was the perfect time to slip away. He tapped the edge of the letter, mind racing. If he chose to go to Sunspear in secret, how would he manage it? He supposed he could convince the small council that he had business in the Reach or something to do with the crown's finances. Taking a ship from King's Landing to Dorne might allow him to bypass the roads, which were increasingly unsafe. And if he disguised his purpose carefully, yes, it might be done. At last he folded the letter and locked it in a small coffer. He would think on it further. But a new sense of excitement flared. Perhaps Doran truly did have answers. 2 more days passed. The final answer came in the form of a large crate from Casterly Rock. Tyrion, anxiously anticipating documents, had it brought straight to his chamber. Inside, packed with straw, were several old leather-bound diaries and a bundle of letters sealed with the Lannister lion in dusty red wax. A missive from Maester Cleon accompanied them, apologizing for the condition of some volumes, but assuring Tyrion that all relevant materials around the time of Lady Joanna's final months had been enclosed. For a moment Tyrion hesitated to touch them. He felt a sudden fear, as if these pages might confirm or shatter every suspicion. But he steeled himself. He carried the diaries to his table, trimmed the candle, and began to read. Most of it was unremarkable, scrawled by minor retainers or household ladies. One diary, penned by Joanna's friend and cousin Lady Replies, detailed the day-to-day gossip at Casterly Rock, disputes with stewards, the arrival of shipments, an upcoming feast. Tyrion skimmed the pages for any mention of the court in King's Landing, or for mention of Joanna traveling there. He read for hours, eyes burning, occasionally taking a sip of wine to stave off exhaustion. At last, near the diary's end, he found a cryptic passage. I remain troubled by the rumors of the king's attentions. Joanna has grown quiet since her return from court. Tywin does not speak of it, but he is more ill-tempered than ever. I think the king's presence at Harrenhal that day did not go without a cost. Joanna is not the same, though she tries to hide it. Tyrion closed his eyes, heartbeat picking up. So King Aerys had been present at Harrenhal around the same time as Joanna. That much he knew from other stories, but seeing it confirmed in her cousin's words made it feel more real. He read on. She rarely complains, but I have seen her tears. I wonder if Tywin knows the true depth of it, or if he only guesses. The king insulted her publicly, I hear. Yet she said nothing. Now that she is with child, I worry about her health. She tries to be strong, but I see the fear. Sometimes she holds her belly as if uncertain of what grows there. A chill ran down Tyrion's spine. He had often imagined that his mother faced some difficulties near the time of his birth. She had died delivering him after all. But the mention of fear, uncertain of what grows there, did that mean Joanna suspected the child was not Tywin's? The day of Harrenhal, the king's attentions, some cost, that was not spoken aloud. Tyrion felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was no proof, but it was a clue. A piece in a puzzle he had never dreamed he'd be forced to solve. He continued reading, sifting the diaries for more references. Most were vague, but one letter in the box caught his eye. It was from Tywin himself, though it had never been sent. Perhaps Joanna had hidden it away, or Phalis had kept it. The wax was cracked, the parchment yellowed. Tyrion opened it carefully, mind reeling at the intimacy of reading a letter that Tywin might have written in frustration or fear. The letter read, Joanna, I will not stand for his meddling. He may be king, but I am Tywin Lannister, and I have served him more faithfully than he deserves. If he dares again, I will remove you from King's Landing at once. We will not remain a moment longer than necessary. The notion that he might lay hands on you is abhorrent. I will do what I must to preserve our honor. Yet I fear for you. If he calls upon you, do not go alone. Keep the septa near. Keep eyes upon you at all times. I do not trust his intentions. He is cunning and cruel, and I have seen the way he regards you. The memory of that tourney at Harrenhal, it does not fade. If the rumor is true, I will be forced to act. You are my wife. No matter what the king does, I will see it repaid 1,000-fold should he commit such a sin. Come home soon. The rock is safer than that den of vipers. Tyrion found his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The letter was powerful in its suggestion. Tywin had feared the Mad King would lay hands on Joanna Todd. And if the rumor was true, Tywin would be forced to act. Tyrion could picture his father's stern expression as he wrote this, the father who would never let a slight go unanswered. But if King Aerys had indeed forced himself upon Joanna, or seduced her in some twisted manner, how would Tywin have avenged that? He might have bided his time, nursing his rage. But if a child resulted, Tyrion set the letter aside with trembling hands. Confirmation enough. Tywin may not have been certain, but he had dreaded the possibility. That dread might explain years of bitterness toward Tyrion, the cold loathing in Tywin's eyes. You are no son of mine. He had said it once in anger and again in scorn. Perhaps he had spoken literally. Tyrion felt the sting of tears in his eyes, which he dashed away. He would not weep. Not for the father who had hated him. Not for the mother who had died. Or maybe for both. But for now, he merely stared at the words, numb. Something hammered at his chest, a swirl of anger and sorrow. If only his father had told him. But Tywin was not the sort of man to reveal such a humiliating truth. Better to let Tyrion remain a Lannister in name, if only to keep up appearances. He recalled how Tywin had tried to keep him from inheriting Casterly Rock, how he had said the fortress would pass to Jaime, or even Cersei. Now Tyrion understood. He was never meant to be a Lannister heir because Tywin believed he was a Targaryen bastard. Yet ironically, through all that cruelty, Tywin had still raised him, in a fashion, still kept him at court. That was Tywin's twisted pride, no doubt. The illusions must be maintained. But, oh, how deeply Tyrion felt the sting now, reading these old lines. He shut the diaries and letters. The secret, if it had not been certain before, now seemed as close to certainty as he might ever find. Tyrion Lannister, the imp, was likely sired by the Mad King. The irony was so thick he could choke on it. His mother had died bringing him into the world, and in the end, Tywin had never forgiven him for more reasons than one. All of it came crashing into him at once. He closed his eyes, breath hitching. He had no illusions that being a Targaryen meant a glorious destiny. Far from it. The Targaryens had been hunted, their house name tarnished by madness and tyranny. Even if Daenerys lived, the Iron Throne was no certain prize. The realm was in chaos. Yet a strange, furious resolve took hold of him. If Tywin had wanted to keep him from claiming Casterly Rock, so be it. Maybe the rock was never meant to be his. But dragons soared above petty gold. He thought of Daenerys Targaryen across the sea, building her power in far-off lands. A sibling or half-niece or half-sister from a cousin's side. The Targaryen family tree was tangled, but if this rumor was true, that made Daenerys some kind of kin to him. Tyrion allowed himself a bitter smile. Perhaps he had an entirely different inheritance. If nothing else, it gave him a sense of direction. If the realm was about to be shaken by the return of the dragons, perhaps Tyrion had a role to play in it. He had always loved books and knowledge. Maybe that knowledge could serve the Targaryen cause in ways that money and swords could not. Or maybe it would lead him to a stake and a funeral pyre. Hard to say. But he was not one to shy away from the gamble. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. The old diaries lay there. Silent witnesses to a secret that had festered all these years. Tyrion exhaled sharply. He knew, with absolute certainty, what he must do. Doran Martell's invitation was his best lead. If any ally of the Targaryens remained in Westeros, it was the Martells. He would go to Sunspear. If the prince was prepared to share more, Tyrion would hear it. Perhaps then, with the final puzzle pieces, he might decide how best to play his new hand in this interminable game of thrones. His mind slipped back to Varys' words. The blood can speak, if you know how to listen. Tyrion wondered if it was already speaking, in the rush of heat he felt in his veins, or in the fierce sense of purpose that flared to life. He set his jaw. He would not remain in King's Landing, subject to Joffrey's mewling and Cersei's poisonous barbs. While the true nature of his birth cried out for exploration, he would arrange matters, quietly, carefully. Then he would slip from the city and make his way to Dorne. He rang for Podrick Payne, his loyal squire. When Podrick entered, blinking with that perpetually confused look, Tyrion gave him instructions to prepare for a journey. Pack light, Pod. We're going on a trip. A trip, my lord? Tyrion nodded, forcing a wry smile. Yes, a rather important one. I'll explain on the road. Podrick bobbed his head. Yes, my lord. Tyrion watched him go, then turned back to the diaries. His fingers trembled as he closed the crate. If the world discovered what he knew, he could only hope it would fear him enough to give him the advantage. But was that not the Targaryen hallmark? Fire and blood. Tyrion let out a small huff of irony. Could he, a stunted dwarf, truly be a scion of that fiery lineage? He felt no special power in his limbs, no madness. Perhaps the real trait he shared with the Targaryens was a gift for survival against impossible odds. He would soon find out. Departing King's Landing without rousing suspicion was no simple task. Tyrion spent days spinning half-truths to the small council, explaining that he must travel south to investigate certain new trade opportunities that might alleviate the royal coffers. He couched it in language about new shipping routes, the cost of grain, and so forth. Cersei, furious as always, demanded to know why he could not send an envoy. Tyrion assured her that personal oversight was needed. He did not trust the new master of whisperers, that had replaced Varys, a sly man named Sir Orton Carvel, to handle finances. Cersei did not seem pleased, but she had her own crises with Joffrey's temper and Margaery Tyrell's influence at court. She waved him off. Good riddance, Tyrion suspected, was her real sentiment. Finally, with a small retinue of men he trusted, Bronn among them of course, and Podrick, Tyrion set out in a modest carriage. He had chosen the quiet approach, rather than the grand Lannister banners. The roads were dangerous enough. Brigands and outlaws prowled in the wake of the war. Tyrion's first plan was to make for the Roserad, then the coastal route leading toward the Stormlands, and eventually skirt into the Dornish territories near the Boneway. From there, he might find a guide to take him to Sunspear. A risk, but with gold, everything became easier. The journey began under a scorching sun. The wind from Blackwater Bay offered little relief. Tyrion sweated in his doublet, cursing quietly, though he was grateful not to have the full Lannister retinue. That would only attract trouble. Bronn rode ahead, scanning the horizon for threats, while Pod rode at Tyrion's side, awkward in the saddle. Tyrion occasionally dozed in the carriage, head bobbing against a cushion, but each time he closed his eyes, the swirl of half-remembered diaries and Tywin's letter taunted him. Sleep was a restless friend these days. By the time they reached the Stormlands border, nearly a fortnight later, Tyrion had grown tired of the road. Carts broke wheels, rains turned the path to mud, and local peasants eyed them suspiciously. Once, a band of ragged men attempted to block the path, brandishing clubs. Bronn and 2 other sellswords drew steel, and the brigands scattered without a proper fight. Tyrion marveled that the realm had sunk into such chaos. Then again, with the War of the Five Kings still raging in the north and in the Riverlands, perhaps it was no surprise. In this fracturing world, a Targaryen might well find opportunity. Late one afternoon, beneath a sky streaked with pink and orange, Tyrion ordered them to make camp near a small stream. While the sellswords tended to the horses, Tyrion stepped away, seeking a moment's peace. He gazed at the setting sun, feeling a faint breeze that cooled his sweaty cheeks. The grass swayed in golden waves, and he momentarily allowed himself to imagine dragons overhead, like some half-forgotten dream. A low chuckle escaped his lips. "You laugh, my lord?" Podrick asked, having come up behind him. Tyrion turned, noticing how Pod shifted from foot to foot. He realized the boy was carrying a sealed scroll. "What is it, Pod?" "A raven arrived. Found our camp earlier. I didn't read it." "Benti." Tyrion took the scroll and cracked the seal. Inside, in a flowing, practiced hand, was a note from Varys. The spider had used some hidden means to track Tyrion's progress, it seemed. Tyrion read, "My dear Lord Tyrion, I trust your journey is proceeding safely. Word travels that you are bound for the Dornish marches. Might I advise caution? The prince is a subtle man, and so are his bannermen. They have not forgotten their losses. Still, knowledge is often found in the darkest corners. I suspect you will find what you seek, and perhaps more. Do be careful, my lord. The seas ahead may hold dragons, but the sands of Dorne can be equally treacherous. Yours in the shadows, Varys." Tyrion snorted softly. Varys' ability to know his every move never failed to impress or unnerve him. But the letter was not unfriendly. A subtle warning, perhaps. Tyrion refolded it. "Burn it," he told Podrick. "No need to keep such things lying about." Pod obeyed, heading toward the fire. Tyrion watched the boy go with a twinge of affection. Pod's loyalty was unwavering, though Tyrion suspected the young lad was thoroughly confused by their journey. Perhaps in time, Tyrion would explain. Then again, how did one explain the notion that you might be the bastard son of a deranged king? Tyrion's gaze drifted southward, toward the invisible border of Dorne. He realized, with a small swirl of anticipation, that soon he might hold a conversation that would further confirm or deny his lineage. Doran Martell would not have invited him otherwise. That thought kindled both excitement and dread. But there was no turning back now. Even if the road to Sunspear ended with a blade in his ribs, Tyrion preferred that to living in ignorance. He sighed, returning to camp. Perhaps soon the dwarven lion would meet the sun-scorched snake of Dorne, and from there who could say? The transition into Dornish lands was subtle at first, but soon undeniable. The air grew drier, the flora changed, and the horizon took on the rolling hills that preluded the desert beyond. Tyrion's traveling party descended from the Prince's Pass, weaving through canyons and rocky outcroppings where the wind howled across the stone. The temperature soared by day and plummeted at night. Tyrion found himself cursing the dryness that parched his throat, despite guzzling water and wine in equal measure. Eventually, they encountered a small patrol of Dornish riders bearing the sigil of House Uller. Bronn was quick to lay a hand on his sword, but Tyrion raised an arm to show peaceful intent. He explained that they traveled under the invitation of Prince Doran Martell. After a tense moment, the riders agreed to escort them to Sunspear. Perhaps the glint of gold Tyrion discreetly showed helped. So it was that Tyrion and his retinue rode under guard for 2 days, deeper into the heart of Dorne, until at last the towers of Sunspear rose in the distance, tall spires piercing the blistering sky. Tyrion remembered Sunspear from old descriptions in library tomes, a fortress by the sea, built to withstand the storms in the scorching desert. Its walls were not as grand as those of King's Landing, yet there was a certain elegance in the architecture. The domes and slender towers had a distinct flair that spoke of Dornish independence and their once fierce resistance to Targaryen conquest. Now, ironically, Tyrion arrived to learn more of that Targaryen legacy. Upon passing through the heavy gates, they were met by Oberyn Martell's paramour, Ellaria Sand, her beauty striking, her eyes keen. She greeted Tyrion politely, though with curiosity. Tyrion bowed as deeply as his stature allowed, conscious of her gaze lingering on him. "Prince Doran awaits you in the Tower of the Sun," Ellaria said. "We have prepared rooms for you. You must be weary from the road." Benderol. Bronn and the other guards took the horses to the stables, while Podrick helped Tyrion make his way through the winding corridors. The heat inside the castle was tempered somewhat by breezes from the ocean. Servants offered cool water and dates, a small relief. Tyrion used the moment to survey the architecture, noting the heavy tapestries, the mosaic floors of colored tile, the sweet scent of incense. Dorne was unlike the rest of Westeros, with its own traditions and style. He felt like a foreigner stepping into a new land for the first time, even though it was all one realm in name. They reached a large solar atop the tower, where the windows caught the sea breeze. A cushioned couch stood near a low table set with figs, olives, and a pitcher of wine. There, seated in a wheeled chair, was Prince Doran Martell, a man with weary eyes but a regal bearing. His hands rested on the arms of his chair as he looked Tyrion over. One of his guards, Ario Hota, stood to the side, an imposing presence with an axe strapped to his back. Tyrion bowed as best he could. "Prince Doran, I thank you for your hospitality. Forgive my abruptness in seeking an audience, but I believe we have matters of shared interest." Doran inclined his head. "I trust your journey was safe." "As safe as the roads can be in these times." Tyrion approached. He noticed the prince studying him keenly, especially his face. Did Doran search for a hint of Targaryen features? Tyrion's mismatched eyes, his pale hair that had darkened over the years. Or was Tyrion merely paranoid? "You came asking about certain histories," Doran said. "Histories that concern the late King Aerys and your mother, Joanna Lannister." Tyrion felt tension coil in his gut. "Yes, my lord. I believe you may have knowledge that clarifies certain events around the time of my birth." Doran waved a hand, and Ellaria poured wine into a goblet, offering it to Tyrion. He took it gratefully. The prince continued, "I will not pretend ignorance. Word reached me, from your letter, that you suspect King Aerys had an interest in your mother. That is not the first time I've heard such rumors. Dorne, as you know, was closely tied to the Targaryens through my sister Elia's marriage to Prince Rhaegar. We had eyes and ears at court, and it was well known in some circles that King Aerys indulged certain lusts." "Bow." Tyrion sipped. The wine was tart but smooth. "Then you believe the rumors might be true?" Doran studied him. "I can offer you this. There was talk among those close to my sister They whispered that Lord Tywin's abrupt resignation as Hand of the King was not solely because the king refused to betroth Rhaegar to Cersei. Some said it was also because the king humiliated Joanna, his lady wife, at a feast, made comments about her body. But the real cause of Tywin's fury was something deeper. Something that happened in private. My sister's ladies used to speak of a night during the tourney at Harrenhal, when the king had Joanna brought to his chambers. She left in tears. The next day, Tywin was unstoppable in his rage. None of this is confirmed, mind you, but the stories have a consistent thread. Mentor. Tyrion clenched his jaw. If that is true, then the rest follows. My mother was with child soon after. By the time I was born, she died in labor, and Tywin's hatred for me was boundless. Nenderwar. Doran nodded sympathetically. It fits. Tywin was a proud man, fiercely so. He might have swallowed his pride for a time to keep his position, but the final straw came when the king's attentions crossed a line he could not abide. No man, no matter how powerful, insults Tywin Lannister's wife without consequence. The prince paused, eyes darkening with an old sadness. But you must realize what this means for you. If King Aerys sired you, you carry Targaryen blood. In another time, that might have been an instant death sentence during Robert Baratheon's rebellion. Now with the winds shifting, it could be a path to power. Or destruction. Now, Tyrion's voice came out hoarse. You speak truly, my lord, but I cannot ignore the significance. If Daenerys Targaryen truly rises across the sea, if she comes to claim the throne, then this lineage could place me in her orbit, or in her crosshairs. Doran's eyes flickered with a measured interest. You are cunning, Lord Tyrion. I heard tales of your skill at court, your silver tongue, your mastery of coin. If Daenerys returns with dragons, she will need more than swords. She will need counsel, men who understand the realm, who can navigate the intrigues of the great houses. Wow. A wry smile tugged at Tyrion's lips. And you, Prince Doran, would prefer to see a Targaryen on the throne than a Lannister or Baratheon. After what happened to your sister Elia, perhaps you see me as a bridge to an alliance with Daenerys, or a threat to be carefully managed? The prince's expression did not change. Perhaps both, Lord Tyrion. I will not deny that House Martell still seeks justice for Elia. But I have no love for the Lannisters who brought my house so much pain. Yet here you stand, a man who might be both Lannister and Targaryen. It is quite the riddle. I do not think you participated in the crimes against Elia. You were but a child. Still, your house name is stained in my land. Then Tyrion raised his goblet. I understand, my lord. My house has many sins. And if I am not truly of that house in blood, well, that is another twist. If you can provide me with any documents, any letters, that further support the truth of my parentage, I would be in your debt. In return, I am prepared to be flexible in any alliances that might arise, should Daenerys Targaryen land in Westeros. Mentor. Doran let out a slow breath. I have no documents that explicitly name you as King Aerys's son. But I do have testimonies, accounts from those who served the royal household in those days, who claim to have witnessed the king summoning Lady Joanna. It would not be ironclad proof, but in the world of politics, these statements could sway minds if presented carefully. He paused, then gestured for Illyria to retrieve a small box from a shelf. She placed it on the table. Doran unlocked it, removing several folded parchments. These are copies of statements I had recorded by some who were present at Harrenhal and later in King's Landing. You are welcome to read them. Tyrion's heart hammered. Here it was, further corroboration from a separate source. He accepted the parchments, scanning the spidery handwriting, the descriptions of how the king demanded Lady Joanna's company, how she emerged hours later looking distraught. One statement from a seamstress even noted that the king had torn Lady Joanna's dress in anger or passion. Tyrion felt sick, reading the details, imagining his mother's shame and terror. For all Tywin's cruelty, Tyrion felt a moment of strange sympathy for the man. No wonder he had hated the king with every breath. He swallowed. Thank you, Prince Doran. This is invaluable, if only for my own sense of clarity. Doran nodded. We Martells have our reasons for keeping track of Targaryen matters. It is an old wound we cannot let fester. Now I would ask you, what do you intend to do with this knowledge, Lord Tyrion? Tyrion leaned back, swirling the wine in his cup. I do not see a future for me at King's Landing, under Joffrey's rule or my sister's manipulations. The Lannisters have used me poorly, and I doubt they will cease. Perhaps I will take ship east. I have heard rumors of Daenerys Targaryen in Essos. Some say she has dragons, that she intends to return. It might be wise for me to see the truth of her cause. See if it aligns with my own. If I can be of use to her, perhaps. He paused, meeting Doran's gaze. But before I do that, I would humbly suggest that if you still harbor a desire for justice or for a Targaryen restoration, you might find common cause with me. My knowledge of King's Landing, my ties there, could be valuable. Daenerys might well be open to an alliance with Dorne, especially if she learns how your family suffered under the Lannisters. Doran steepled his fingers. My brother Oberyn once sought such a path. Now he is gone. A flash of pain crossed his features, but it was swiftly hidden. Yet I am not blind to opportunity. Very well, Lord Tyrion. I will consider this. You are welcome to remain in Sunspear for a time. Rest from your travels. When you are ready to depart, I will see that you have a safe route to a port where you can board a ship. It may be that a Targaryen prince deserves the chance to meet the Targaryen queen. Now. Tyrion's throat constricted at the phrase, Targaryen prince. He managed a thin smile. I doubt many would call me a prince, but perhaps in the secret ledgers of the world, that is what I am. I offer my thanks, Prince Doran, and know that I do not forget a kindness. Now. Doran inclined his head, then let Illyria lead Tyrion to his guest quarters. As Tyrion followed her, he glanced back at the prince. The man looked weary, but not powerless. A cunning mind lurked behind those tired eyes, planning how House Martell might shape the future. Tyrion wondered if a day would come when they would stand side by side in alliance, or across a battlefield if their interests diverged. Such was the game. But for now, Tyrion was grateful. He found himself in a cool, airy chamber, adorned with tapestries of red and orange. A bed with carved posts stood in the center, a welcome sight after the trials of the road. Tyrion dismissed Pod and Bronn, telling them to find their own rest. When they had gone, he slumped down on the bed, letting the tension slip from his shoulders. He was close now, close to fully acknowledging what he was, or might be. The diaries, the testimonies, Tywin's letter, Doran's confirmations, none of it was absolute proof. There was no single piece of paper that read, Tyrion is King Aerys's son. But the mosaic of evidence was overwhelming. If he had any lingering doubts, they were overshadowed by the consistency of these accounts. Tyrion was, for all intents and purposes, a Targaryen bastard raised as a Lannister. The realm might never accept it, or if it did, it would be with torches and pitchforks. But it was the truth, and Tyrion had always prided himself on his devotion to the truth. Truth was a funny thing, though. Now that he had it, what would he do? The next step seemed inevitable. Find Daenerys. Or at least see for himself whether she was indeed the last living Targaryen monarch, aside from the dwarf who might have the same father. Could they be allies? Siblings in spirit, if not in official genealogical record. She might spurn him, or she might see the value in having a man like him as an advisor. Perhaps she would take one look at him and spit in disgust. Or feed him to her dragons. Tyrion felt a swirl of anxiety and excitement. Either way, he had never been one to shy from risk. Not with so much at stake. He recalled the words of the Targaryen motto, fire and blood. He allowed himself a moment to contemplate that dreadful phrase. Fire and blood had followed the Targaryen line for centuries, scarring the realm with war and forging it anew. Tyrion had only known scorn and mockery in his life, heartbreak and betrayal. Did he want to embrace the savage destiny of a Targaryen? Or forge something new, use the knowledge of the past to build a better future. He closed his eyes, feeling the dryness of his throat and the lingering heat of the day. It did not matter if he wanted it or not. The blood was in him, pulsing through his veins, a legacy he could not unmake. All he could do was shape how he used it. And if Daenerys sought to break the wheel of power in Westeros, perhaps he could help her do it. Maybe, in doing so, he might find purpose beyond what Tywin or Cersei ever believed he could achieve. A faint knock came at the door. Podrick's muffled voice called, "My lord? Are you well?" Tyrion roused himself. "Enter." The door creaked open. Podrick, carrying a jug of water, stepped inside. "I brought some fresh water. They said the sun can be dangerous for those not used to it." "That Quite so. Thank you, Pod." Tyrion accepted the jug, poured water into a cup, and drank deeply. The water tasted sweet and cool on his parched tongue. Pod hovered, uncertain. "My lord, if I may ask, why have we come to Sunspear? We've never been so far from King's Landing without a large escort. The men say, well, they say this is not about trade routes." Tyrion smiled wryly. "No, it isn't. But you needn't worry. We are guests of Prince Doran, and you are under my protection. As to the reason, let us call it a search for certain truths, Pod. Truths that might change everything, or might lead nowhere. But I must see it through." "Nah." Pod looked at him earnestly. "I understand, my lord. I'll follow you, no matter what. You've been good to me." Tyrion felt a rare warmth stir in his chest. Loyalty was a precious commodity. "Thank you, Pod. Just keep your eyes and ears open. We're in a place where the sands shift quickly, and we must step carefully." Pod bowed, then left. Tyrion stared after him. He wondered if he would ever confide in the boy about his Targaryen heritage, if indeed that was the path. For now, it was best kept close. Besides, he was not ready to declare it to the world. There might come a day when the world would hear a dwarf proclaim, "I am Tyrion Targaryen," but that day was not yet. He still had to see how the game would unfold. Lying back on the bed, Tyrion let his thoughts wander toward the distant east, where rumors said Daenerys had 3 dragons in her care. Would they accept him if they smelled Targaryen blood? He snorted at the fancy. More likely they'd consider him a snack if their mother willed it. But perhaps not. The memory of that night in King's Landing, of Varys saying, "You have his eyes," came back to him. A mocking echo. Well, let the dragons see. Let them judge his blood. One way or another, Tyrion would face the truth. And so, with the dryness of the Dornish evening clinging to his throat, and the faint hush of the sea in the distance, Tyrion drifted into a weary sleep, mind alight with possibilities, and the faint, haunting flicker of dragon wings in his dreams. He stayed in Sunspear for a fortnight, as Prince Doran offered cautious hospitality. They spoke sometimes, strolling in the shaded gardens at dusk, where the scent of night-blooming flowers hung thick in the air. Doran moved in his wheeled chair, escorted by Ariohota, while Tyrion waddled beside him, swatting at the occasional insect. They spoke of the realm's unrest, the cunning of the Tyrells, the ambitions of the Ironborn. Doran seemed keen to glean Tyrion's insight on the shifting alliances in King's Landing. In turn, Tyrion asked about the distribution of Prince Rhaegar's supporters, those who might still cling to the memory of a Targaryen monarchy. Doran had a measured view. Many in Dorne still loathed the Lannisters, but they were not all eager to spill more blood. They wanted justice, yes, but not necessarily a war that might ravage their home. Tyrion was careful not to overstate his intent to side with Daenerys should she arrive, but he allowed Doran to see the shape of it. He also gleaned that Doran was aware of Daenerys' exploits in Slaver's Bay, freeing slaves and defeating the armies of Yunkai and Meereen. News from Essos came slowly, but it came. It seemed Daenerys was gathering strength. In Tyrion's mind, that only increased the importance of forging an understanding before she arrived on Westerosi shores. When the day came that Tyrion decided to depart, Prince Doran arranged for a swift galley to take him from the planky town at the mouth of the Greenblood River to Volantis or Pentos, wherever Tyrion chose to disembark. The ship was captained by a young Dornishman with a taste for adventure, used to ferrying merchants across the narrow sea. Before Tyrion boarded, Doran presented him with a small chest of the copies of statements he had shown him, and a few more references from House Martell's archives that might corroborate his lineage. Tyrion accepted them with gratitude, tucking them safely among his belongings. As you sail east, consider that Doran does not forget, Doran said softly. Should you stand beside Daenerys when she comes, remind her that the Martells once lost much to the Lannisters. Perhaps a chance for reconciliation exists, if the right tongues speak. No. Tyrion inclined his head. You have my word, my lord. I will not forget Dorna's grievances. I have my own reasons to see the Lannister hold on the throne ended. Doran's expression remained inscrutable. Safe travels, Lord Tyrion. Or should I call you something else? A faint grin quirked Tyrion's lips. For now, Lord Tyrion will suffice. He bowed. Until we meet again. He boarded the galley, Podrick and Bronn at his side, along with a handful of Sellswords loyal to him rather than House Lannister. The gangplank was drawn in. The ship's oarsmen took up their rhythm, and soon they were moving along the coast, the water shimmering beneath the fierce Dornish sun. Tyrion stood at the rail, gazing back at the receding coastline of Westeros. So much had changed since he last left these shores, once as a prisoner, once as a traveling emissary. Now, he left as a man on a personal quest to discover how to wield the truth of his parentage. Across the narrow sea lay the unknown, Daenerys Targaryen, her unsullied legions, and her dragons. Tyrion felt a mixture of dread and exhilaration. He pictured the day he might stand before the mother of dragons, haltingly proclaim that he shared her blood. Would she rejoice? Laugh? Demand proof? Or incinerate him on the spot? And yet, it was better to face the dragon than to cower in the lion's den. King's Landing held no future for him, not under Joffrey's rule or Cersei's venomous watch. His path stretched eastward, into a land of sultans and sellswords, golden cities and slaver strongholds. He would find Daenerys, if fortune allowed it. And there, perhaps, he would stake his claim as Tyrion Targaryen, or at least earn a place in her court as Tyrion the clever dwarf, a man who knew how to navigate the labyrinth of Westerosi power. He felt the ocean breeze on his face, the salt tang stinging his lips. The waves lulled him into a reverie. Memories of Tywin's harsh voice echoed in his mind, "You are no son of mine." Tyrion's lips curled into a crooked grin. "Indeed, father, I am not. It took half my life to learn the truth, but here I am now. Free of your shadow, free to decide my destiny. Let the world call him imp, let them sneer." He cared little for their scorn. He had a mind sharper than most swords, and a secret that could change the course of the realm. In the Game of Thrones, knowledge was power as much as gold or armies. Tyrion intended to play the pieces he had been given to the fullest, and if the realm burned, at least it would not be by his hand alone. Fire and blood might be the Targaryen words, but Tyrion hoped that, given the chance, he could shape the next age into something less cruel than the last. Perhaps that was a fool's hope, but Tyrion had been called a fool for far less. He preferred to call it ambition, tempered by cynicism. The ship sailed onward, the horizon opening up before them like a promise. Tyrion closed his eyes, recalling that first time he had read of dragons in the old tomes as a boy. He had found them fascinating then, just as he found them thrilling now. Where others saw nightmares, Tyrion saw possibility. Dragons were unstoppable, unpredictable. So too was he, the dwarf scorned by all. Let them see what it meant for a dragon to rise from the ashes of Lannister pride. He opened his eyes to the dazzling glare of the sun on water, the gulls calling overhead. A new life beckoned. The battered, twisted pieces of his old one had led him here, to this uncertain path. He felt the stirring of a grin, as if mocking destiny itself. He would meet Daenerys. He would see for himself if the Targaryen name could be redeemed, or if madness still ran in their veins. And in doing so, he might find his own redemption, or his own downfall. But Tyrion was tired of living in fear. If he was indeed a Targaryen, he would claim it on his own terms. No longer bound to the father who scorned him, the sister who despised him, the nephew who threatened him. The open sea was a far kinder place than King's Landing's labyrinth of lies. And the future? Well, the future was open too. With that thought, Tyrion raised a goblet of wine to his lips. Dornish red, strong and heady, drank deep, and let himself relish the burn in his throat, as if it were dragonfire awakening within his blood. The galley slid away from the Dornish coast in the early gray of morning, sails snapping in a salt-heavy breeze. Tyrion stood at the prow, wind tugging at his hair and cloak, gazing back at the dwindling silhouette of Sunspear's spires. He gripped the ship's rail, letting the brine sting his nostrils, and the uneven swaying of the deck remind him that this was no dream. The horizon was open, the future uncertain. He had set foot upon a path he could no longer abandon. He would cross the sea, chase word of Daenerys Targaryen, and in so doing, decide what it meant to bear the blood of the dragon. He felt Bronn's presence behind him, a comfortable half-step removed. The sellsword had refused to let Tyrion sail alone. Perhaps gold still bound Bronn's loyalty, or perhaps a grudging friendship had developed between them. Podrick, too, was here, though the boy was below deck, presumably trying to quiet his seasick stomach. Tyrion could sympathize. His own stomach lurched now and again, and he'd known his share of nauseating voyages. But this crossing felt different. He was not merely traveling to arrange alliances for Joffrey or to broker some Lannister trade agreement. He was free of King's Landing's suffocating intrigues, free to set the terms of his own destiny. They sailed east by southeast, hugging the southern coastline of Westeros for a time, then turning into open waters once they reached the stepstones. The plan was to dock in Volantis. The Dornish captain, a slim, dark-haired man named Corrith, had assured Tyrion that he made frequent journeys to Volantis with spice and silk cargo. From Volantis, Tyrion could find a riverboat or caravan that would take him farther east, following rumors of the Targaryen queen in Meereen. Each day, Tyrion studied the shape of the waves and the changing sky, half expecting an omen, some flicker of flame in the clouds, a sign that the gods took notice of his journey. But the gods, if they watched, sent no clear signals. He spent the first few days leaning against the rails, lost in thought. Now and then he'd speak with Bronn, who seemed curious but never pressed too hard about the details of Tyrion's quest. Instead, Bronn asked practical questions. What's our next step in Volantis? Will there be a comfortable bed, or do I have to kill some brigand to sleep indoors? What if the Targaryen girl doesn't like dwarfs? Tyrion answered dryly or brushed off the jests with a sardonic smile. By night, he shared cups of the Dornish wine with the captain, whose stories of pirates and storms made the hours pass more swiftly. Podrick regained his composure after a day or two, and resumed his wide-eyed, earnest presence. Tyrion taught him a bit about sea charts and navigation. Pod listened like an attentive sparrow, occasionally asking whether they'd soon meet the rumored dragons. Tyrion always offered some laconic remark, for he would not lie and say it was certain they'd be welcomed in Daenerys' court. But neither would he kill the boy's sense of wonder. Part of Tyrion's own heart still felt that wonder too. 2 weeks of fair weather and favorable winds brought them to the mighty black wall of Volantis. The city rose on the banks of the great river that poured its muddy waters into the summer sea. Galleys and trading vessels of every description thronged its docks. Towers of ancient black stone loomed overhead, remnants of old Valyria's expansion across Essos. Tyrion had read enough history to know that Volantis was once the proudest daughter of the Valyrian freehold, and its people still clung to an arrogant belief in their own supremacy. He half expected to see dragons perched on the ramparts, even though true dragons had vanished from the world for more than a century, save, supposedly, for those belonging to Daenerys. A shiver raced through him as he caught the sweet and rancid stink of Volantis's harbor. He was reminded that, Targaryen or not, he was stepping into new territory, a place where words, coin, and cunning would count for more than any family name. They disembarked onto a dock jammed with workers, slaves, and free traders. The heat felt oppressive even compared to Dorne. The sun glared off the black stones. Bronn hefted a travel bag over his shoulder, while Podrick tried not to stare at the slave tattoos on every other face in the crowd. Tyrion, swallowing his distaste, instructed them to keep their possessions close. He had hidden gold stashed in false-bottom chests. He did not intend to flaunt it. Beggars and pickpockets roamed the wharves, along with the tiger cloaks, Volantis' city guard, who were not above extorting travelers if they smelled money. "Where to, then?" Bronn asked, scanning the throng with practiced wariness. "The southern market," Tyrion answered. "Captain Korath says the inns there will rent us rooms without demanding to see a Volantine patron. We'll want to find a broker, or perhaps a caravan heading to Meereen. Dragons do not come to us, apparently. We must chase them." Bronn smirked. "We'll be chasing more than dragons if half the tales about Meereen are true. The city's been at war with Yunkai, Astapor, the slavers. Still want to walk into that?" Tyrion spread his hands. "Since when did you shy from trouble? I thought you thrived on it. Trouble might be profitable if we play our cards right." "Mentee. Profitable, eh?" Bronn's eyes lit with greed. "If the pay is good, I'll go anywhere." "And if it isn't good," Tyrion said, "I suspect you'll help yourself to whatever loot you can claim." They moved along the teeming streets, pressed on all sides by slaves and hawkers. The scents of spice, incense, and waste mingled in the heavy air. Volantis was a city of extremes. Wealthy nobles and priestesses of Arlor in extravagant robes paraded along the central avenues, while half-naked slaves carried sedan chairs under whips. Tyrion kept his hood raised to avoid drawing attention to his dwarfish features, though by now he was used to stares. Still, it was best not to provoke any drunks or bravos who might decide he was easy sport. They found a modest inn with a flaking sign in the shape of an elephant. The innkeeper, a lean woman with a shaved head and a scar across her cheek, took Tyrion's coin without comment, assigning them rooms that smelled faintly of mildew. While Bronn wrinkled his nose, Pod said nothing, only dragged their belongings upstairs. The place was cramped, but Tyrion had spent years in King's Landing's warrens. This was hardly worse. After checking the door lock thrice, Tyrion took Bronn and Pod to the inn's taproom, where a handful of travelers and locals huddled over cups of sour local ale. The innkeeper directed them to a table near the corner. Tyrion ordered a jug of something strong, ignoring the suspicious glances from the other patrons. He was used to it. He sipped the sour liquor, then turned to Bronn. "Tomorrow, we make inquiries about caravans or ships heading north along the coast to Meereen. With the fighting in Slaver's Bay, it might be safer to journey part by sea and part by land. Or we can try the river route up the Rhoyne, then cross eastward. But time matters. If Daenerys has truly claimed Meereen, I do not want to arrive 6 months from now, when the city might be in new hands." "Then shall." Bronn tapped his fingers on the tabletop. "Caravans would be slow. You might want to hire a smaller ship that can sail up to the mouth of the Skahazadan, near Meereen." Tyrion nodded. "Yes, but that route may be patrolled by Yunkish vessels. They're in open conflict with Daenerys forces. We risk being caught between. I'd prefer a discreet approach, perhaps traveling as merchants or pilgrims." "Men?" Podrick looked uncertain. "What if Daenerys has moved on? What if she's not in Meereen anymore?" Tyrion offered a tight-lipped smile. "Then we'll chase her ghost across the Red Waste if we must. But let's hope the rumors that she's made herself Queen of Meereen are accurate." They continued discussing possibilities while the sun fell behind Volantis' black walls. At length, Tyrion bade them retire. He lingered at the table, swirling the last of his drink, thoughts drifting to dragons and Targaryen lineages. Each step along this path felt more real, more fraught. In Dorne, in the safety of Doran Martell's palace, the idea of sailing east to meet Daenerys had seemed straightforward, even inevitable. Here, in a city thrumming with the trade of slaves, spices, and rumor, he felt the weight of the distance still to go. The only solace was that he had spent his life navigating uncertainty. He was Tyrion the Imp, the outcast who survived on wit. Perhaps that was part of the Targaryen fire in him, tenacious, unwilling to lie down and die. Eventually, he climbed the narrow stairs to his room, settled into the lumpy bed, and let exhaustion claim him. He awoke to a dawn of hazy sunlight filtering through the shutters. Bronn was already stirring in the adjacent chamber, and Podrick knocked to announce that the innkeeper had arranged a simple breakfast of flatbread and figs. Tyrion dressed, belted on a small dagger, and went down to break his fast. The inn's common room was emptier now, just a few travelers finishing up. Tyrion overheard snatches of conversation in half a dozen tongues. He ate quickly, feeling an eagerness to be about his task. He found the local broker the innkeeper had mentioned, a plump, mustachioed man named Ravaz, who set up a wooden stall near the wharf. Ravaz was missing 2 fingers on one hand and wore cheap, gaudy rings on the others. He studied Tyrion's mismatched eyes with curiosity, but soon resumed his businesslike manner. "You want safe passage to Meereen in these times," Ravaz said in accented common tongue, scratching at his mustache. "Not easy. The route to Slaver's Bay is dangerous. Pirates, storms, the war. But not impossible." "Then Doro." Bronn crossed his arms, scowling. "We have coin. I can get you onto a caravan heading to Mantares, then on to Meereen by the inland route," Ravaz suggested. "It will take many weeks, perhaps more. Or there is a ship, the Indigo Star, set to depart in 3 days. A bold captain, so I hear, who might be willing to risk the blockade near Meereen's harbor for a suitable price." Tyrion rubbed his chin. "Blockade, you say? Yunkai has that harbor sealed off." "Then?" "Sealed as best they can," Ravaz replied with a shrug. "Daenerys' forces hold the city, but the Yunkish fleets prowl the Gulf. If the Indigo Star tries to slip in, it may succeed, or it may run afoul of the Sell-Sail navies. Hard to say." He gave a sly grin, as though the risk excited him. Tyrion traded a glance with Bronn. The caravan route would be miserable and slow, exposed to land-based raiders. The maritime approach could be faster, but more likely to involve direct conflict. He found himself leaning toward the sea route anyway. If he had learned anything in King's Landing, it was that bold moves sometimes paid off. "What's the price for booking passage on the Indigo Star?" he asked. Ravaz tapped 2 gold rings on the stall's edge. 100 gold honors for your party of 3, non-refundable. An additional 100 if the ship actually makes it inside Meereen's harbor. That's what the captain demands." Bronn let out a low whistle. Podrick's eyes widened. Tyrion sighed inwardly but nodded. He had Lannister gold stashed away. In truth, 100 or 200 honors was not beyond him. And if all went well, the returns might dwarf such a sum. "Done," he said. "We'll pay half now and the other half upon arrival, if we arrive in one piece." Ravaz shrugged. "You can haggle with the captain directly. I merely facilitate. But come to the docks in 2 days' time, at midday. The Indigo Star will anchor in the 3rd wharf. You can finalize terms then. If you do not, the captain will depart without you." Tyrion extended a hand in his best attempt at a handshake. Ravaz eyed it, then gave a perfunctory grip. "A pleasure," Tyrion muttered, though he hardly felt pleasured. Arranging passage was the easy part. Surviving the voyage might be another matter. They left the broker's stall and made their way through the city's winding streets, flanked by tall pillars carved with strange glyphs from the days of old Valyria. Tyrion's mind turned over the question of whether Daenerys truly commanded enough forces to repel Yunkai and its allies. Rumor said she had the Unsullied, thousands of disciplined eunuch warriors, and some local freedmen. But Tyrion knew war was not won on discipline alone. The slavers had gold and mercenary companies. If the city was under siege, what exactly would he be sailing into? He did not share his misgivings with Podrick, who seemed hopeful, nor with Bronn, who would only shrug. Instead, Tyrion pressed on, exploring a bit of Volantis over the next 2 days, while they awaited the Indigo Star. He saw the grand temple of the Lord of Light, where red-robed priestesses chanted in hypnotic unison. He watched a lavish parade of elephants, part of some wealthy triarch's entourage. He dined on spiced fish and honeyed dates in a raucous open-air market. Even in the swirling chaos, he felt a sense of purpose. Every step propelled him closer to the heart of this mad pursuit. Daenerys Targaryen, and the possibility that she might accept him as an ally, or as a half-brother of sorts, though the genealogical tangle would be enough to confound any septon. On the appointed day, Tyrion led Bronn and Pod to the third wharf. The Indigo Star was a two-masted galley with weather-worn sails and a sturdy hull patched in places. The captain, a lean Volantine woman with narrow, cunning eyes, waited at the gangplank. Her name, Tyrion learned, was Captain Sarala. She had a curved sword on her hip and a piece of green jade in her nose. At first sight, she reminded Tyrion of a fox, wary, swift, and keen for profit. When he mentioned Ravada's fee, she snorted. He always tries to carve a chunk for himself. The price is the price. 100 gold honors now. 100 upon our safe landing in Marine. Agree to that, or find yourself a donkey to ride overland. Tyrion offered his most charming grin, though he suspected charm meant little to Sarala. We agree. But be warned, if you plan to cheat us by dropping anchor in some plague-ridden port short of Marine, you'll find me a most unforgiving passenger. Then she eyed him up and down, lips twitching in a half-smile. A dwarf with a big threat. I've seen stranger in this business. Very well, Lannister or not, have your gold ready. She tapped a foot on the gangplank. Board and stow your gear below. I'm not waiting if you change your mind. Tyrion dug into his purse, handed over half the required sum in glinting gold coins. Sarala counted them quickly, then jerked her head for them to climb aboard. Tyrion beckoned for Podrick to follow with the chest of the remainder. Bronn strode up the plank, scanning the deck and the rigging with a sellsword's eye. He gave Tyrion a short nod, as if to say they'd do well enough here. They set sail within the hour, the Indigo Star gliding out onto the muddy waters of the Rhoyne's mouth before angling toward the summer sea. Tyrion stood by the rail, watching Volantis diminish behind them. He felt again the electric thrill of departure. Another leap of faith. All roads led him to Diaries, it seemed, or to the truth of the Targaryen name. If disaster loomed, well, at least he was riding the crest of the wave rather than cowering on shore. The next weeks were a haze of shifting sails and watchful nights. The summer sea was calm at first, but soon they rounded a rocky cape and found themselves in contested waters, where slaver galleys might appear without warning. Sarala kept a sharp watch, ordering the crew to row hard whenever the wind faltered. Tyrion heard the occasional hiss of rumors. A Volantine fleet was rumored to be in league with Yunkai, or pirates had attacked ships carrying supplies to Diaries, or the sellsword company known as the Second Sons was near Marianne's walls. Tyrion tried to glean what he could, but half of it seemed contradictory. If there was one certainty, it was that Slaver's Bay had become a tempest of warring factions. One night, as the moon hung low and red over the water, the Indigo Star nearly crossed paths with a large war galley bearing Yunkish colors. The lookout spotted it first, dark sails and lanterns bobbing near the horizon. Sarala quietly ordered the rowers to pull the Indigo Star into a cove behind a rugged outcrop of land until the danger passed. Tyrion, crouched on deck beside Bronn, peered through the gloom and glimpsed silhouettes on the war galley's deck. He pictured being boarded, forced to explain their presence. The Yunkish men might decide to enslave them or hurl them overboard. A cold sweat slicked Tyrion's back until the war galley faded into the darkness, sailing off on whatever errand it pursued. When dawn broke, Sarala steered them onward, scowling at the risk. "If I get you to Marine alive, dwarf, you'll owe me a good deal more than gold," she grumbled. Tyrion offered a conciliatory smile. "I'll toast your name in every tavern from here to Pentos, I promise." She snorted and resumed barking orders at her crew. Several days later, the sea's color shifted to the greenish hue of Slaver's Bay. Even the air smelled different, a tang of brine mixed with some sour note. Seabirds circled overhead. Tyrion watched the horizon, expecting at any moment to see the glimmer of Marine's famous pyramids. But an uneasy hush lay upon the deck. The crew moved quietly, scanning for Yunkish vessels or any sign of war galleys. Bronn kept a crossbow near at hand, though Tyrion suspected it would do little good against a full warship. Finally, the sun pierced a bank of clouds, revealing a distant cluster of stone structures rising over a city's walls. Tyrion's pulse quickened. Marine.she. The The city looked imposing even from miles away. Enormous pyramids loomed above the perimeter, some crowned with brass harpies. Tyrion could make out catapults along the ramparts. Thick walls, great gates. Even from afar, the city radiated an ancient, stubborn presence, a place that had existed long before the Targaryens arrived in Westeros. But he also saw lines of tents sprawled across the landside, a besieging army's encampment, presumably. There were sails on the water near the harbor mouth, too. Some flew banners he did not recognize, likely sail ships or allied fleets. Others might be friendly to Daenerys. It was impossible to tell at a glance. Sarala called for the sails to be furled partway. The Indigo Star crept forward, hugging the coast. Tyrion stood with Pod and Bronn near the prow, all of them silent. The tension was a living thing. As they rounded a spit of land, the city's harbor came into clearer view. Tyrion saw battered hulks, smoke drifting from a few burnt-out ships. A cluster of Yunkish galleys blocked the main entrance to the bay, though they were not in perfect formation. Some were anchored, others drifting. A handful of smaller vessels, perhaps blockade runners, bobbed near the shore. The entire scene reeked of conflict. "We can't sail in openly." Sarala muttered, lips set in a grim line. "See those warships? They'll chase us down in no time. Best chance is to slip in under cover of darkness or find a gap. If we can get close enough to the city walls, maybe Daenerys defenders will provide cover. Otherwise, we're fish in a barrel." Tyrion admired her nerve. He took a quick look at the harbor mouth. The Yunkish blockade was formidable, but not impregnable. Some of the ships were anchored a good distance apart, leaving potential corridors if one sailed quietly and at the right moment. "Nightfall, then," he said. "We wait for the moon to go behind clouds, then we attempt to slip through. Unless you'd rather turn back." Sarala spat over the side. "I've taken your coin. I'll see it done, if we aren't all corpses by dawn." With that, she barked commands, and the Indigo Star withdrew behind a rocky island a half-mile offshore. The crew lowered sails, dropped anchor, and prepared for night. Tyrion paced the deck, pondering what might greet them inside Meereen's walls. Would they find Daenerys enthroned as a victorious conqueror, or besieged and weary of strangers? He dreaded that he might arrive just in time to watch her city fall to the slavers. But there was no turning back now. Dusk came slowly, painting the bay in bruised purples and oranges. Small lights dotted the Yunkish ships at anchor. Sarala had her crew douse their own lanterns, leaving the Indigo Star in near darkness. The wind sighed over the waves. One by one, the stars emerged, bright pinpricks in a moonless sky. When the tide shifted, Sarala ordered the anchor raised and the oars readied. The ship began a stealthy approach. Tyrion crouched at the prow, heart hammering. He heard the creak of oarlocks, the faint rustle of sails. Behind him, Pod and Bronn waited, the tension visible in their stiff postures. If the Yunkish blockade spotted them, a pursuit would be swift and deadly. Tyrion ran through possible outcomes in his mind. If the Indigo Star was fired upon by catapults, or if a Yunkish galley closed the distance, they might be forced to scuttle the ship and swim. But in these dark waters, that could be a death sentence. They approached the gap between two blockading ships. Tyrion could see a faint glow from lanterns on the enemy decks. Voices echoed across the water in a language he did not understand. The Indigo Star's rowers pulled smoothly, trying to muffle each stroke. Closer, closer. Tyrion clenched his teeth, expecting at any moment to hear a shout of alarm or see a sudden flare of torchlight. The gap was narrow, perhaps 200 yards. The enemy ships bobbed in place, lines creaking, sails furled. They seemed half-abandoned, or at least inattentive in the gloom. They were halfway through the gap when Tyrion heard a sudden clamor on one of the Yunkish ships, a barked order, footsteps pounding on the deck. His stomach knotted. Were they spotted? He peered into the darkness, trying to discern movement on the Yunkish galley. A flicker of torchlight spilled over the side. Was it being pointed in their direction? He braced himself. But nothing came of it. The Yunkish men must have been shouting at each other for some other reason. The Indigo Star continued on, the rowers pulling quietly, minute after minute. At last, they passed beyond the outer ring of the blockade, and slipped into the calmer waters closer to Meereen's harbor walls. Tyrion exhaled the breath he did not realize he'd been holding. Sarala let out a quiet hiss of triumph. Even in the darkness, Tyrion could sense her grin. They weren't safe yet, but they were inside the blockade. They continued toward the wharves that extended from Meereen's harbor. Tyrion spotted a chain boom that might be raised to block larger ships, but it was lowered. Perhaps the city had no reason to keep it raised, or lacked the manpower to manage it in the midst of war. In the darkness, Meereen's massive gates towered overhead, flanked by grand statues of harpies with outstretched wings. The city's lights glimmered across the water. He could smell the faint scent of sewage and spice drifting on the breeze. Low horns sounded from somewhere deeper in the city. The war was close, but how close? Sarala navigated the Indigo Star to an abandoned pier near the southwestern side of the harbor. Broken crates and severed mooring lines suggested it had been used by the city's defenders earlier in the siege. The rowers carefully brought the galley alongside, and sailors leapt off to secure it with ropes. They all moved quickly, aware that in a matter of minutes, some patrol might come to investigate. Tyrion, Bronn, and Pod disembarked with their gear. Tyrion paused on the dock, rummaging in his cloak for the second pouch of gold. Sarala was right behind him, hand outstretched. He counted out the required sum into her palm, the coins clinking in the night air. She smirked, tucking them away. "You'll find no welcome if the city's truly under siege, but you're alive. Good luck, dwarf." He bowed with mock gravity. "And to you, Captain. If I survive this, I'll drink to your clever seamanship." She departed with her crew, presumably to find a safer berth before dawn. Tyrion was left with Bronn and Pod in the gloom of a half-ruined wharf. They gazed at the towering walls, the distant flicker of torches along the parapets, the hulking shapes of pyramids rising above the skyline. Everything felt ominously quiet. Even the water slapped against the dock with a subdued hush. The three of them lingered, uncertain. At last, Tyrion hefted his pack, mustering a wry smile. "We didn't come all this way to cower on a dock. Let's find a way into the city proper. Perhaps we'll meet friendlier faces than the Yunkish men outside." Bronn grunted. "Or we'll get a spear through the gut from one of the Dragon Queen's Unsullied." "Wouldn't be the first time we faced a rude greeting," Tyrion said. "But I'd prefer to remain unspeared." They made their way along the quay, skirting toppled cranes and debris. The city smelled of lingering smoke, as though fires had raged recently. In the distance, Tyrion heard sporadic shouting, a clang of steel. This was not a peaceful place. At length, they came upon a smaller postern gate set in the harbor wall. It was partially ajar, the iron-bound door battered. Tyrion guessed that it might have been forced open during some skirmish or sabotage. He whispered for Bronn to draw a blade, and Pod to stay close. They slipped through into a narrow passage that cut between thick stone walls. The gloom pressed in, lit only by occasional torches set high on the ramparts. Tyrion heard scuttling. Rats, presumably. Perhaps the city's defenders had bigger problems than policing this small postern gate. That might work to their advantage. After 100 paces, they emerged onto a street lined with shuttered buildings. Sand and dust swirled across the cobbles. A few battered shops bore signs in Kiskari script. Tyrion paused, trying to recall what he knew of Meereen's layout. He remembered reading of a grand plaza near the center of the city, ringed by statues of harpies. From there, broad avenues led up to the largest pyramids where the wealthy resided. If Daenerys was here, she might be holding court in one of those pyramids or in some fortress. They would need directions from a local. But the city seemed almost deserted in this district. They crept along the street. Now and again they passed a collapsed structure, the stone blackened by fire. Tyrion spied half a dozen bodies lying in a side alley, victims of some recent violence. Podrick gagged, but Tyrion pressed him forward. War was war. Meereen's woes were spelled out plainly in blood and ruin. A pair of distant shapes appeared at the far end of the street, silhouetted by torchlight. Tyrion froze, motioning for Bronn and Pod to duck behind a fallen column. He squinted, trying to see if these were guards, freedmen, or something else. The figures carried spears, upright and disciplined. He recognized the tall helms and rigid posture at once. Unsullied. So Daenerys eunuch soldiers still patrolled part of the city, presumably loyal to their queen. That alone was heartening. If the Unsullied were present, Daenerys had not been overrun. But whether they would welcome random strangers in the night was another matter. Tyrion let them pass, deciding not to reveal himself just yet. 2 armed men with spears might be as deadly as an entire legion in these deserted streets. Once they were gone, Tyrion led his companions on a winding route deeper into the city. He noticed more signs of struggle, broken weapons, dried bloodstains. But they also heard faint activity, as if many people remained behind walls, barricaded in houses or hidden away. A child's cry echoed from a shuttered window. Dogs barked in the distance. The swirling gloom of war hung over everything. They emerged at last into a wider thoroughfare lined with huge stone pillars carved to resemble harpies. The pillars led toward a gate that opened into a central plaza. Tyrion saw a flicker of torchlight there, along with the silhouettes of more Unsullied on guard. He debated whether to approach. Sneaking around corners might get them killed. Approaching openly could also get them killed. But perhaps he could reason with the eunuch soldiers if they recognized that he was no Yunkish agent. Before he could decide, the choice was made for him. A voice shouted from behind in High Valyrian. Tyrion spun and saw a half-dozen figures stepping from the shadows, armed with knives and short swords. They wore mismatched tunics, faces half covered with cloth. Not Unsullied, likely freedmen or mercenaries. But from their predatory stance, Tyrion guessed they might be bandits, deserters, or looters. One of them, a tall man with a ragged beard, snarled something in Valyrian that Tyrion only partially understood. It sounded like a demand for coin. Bronn cursed under his breath. Pod shifted. Frightened, Tyrion drew himself up. "My friends," he said in the common tongue, holding his hands wide in a gesture of peace. "We have no quarrel with you. We're simply travelers who wish to see the queen." One of the bandits hissed, "Coin," or "steal," in broken common tongue. Another stepped forward, brandishing a curved blade. Tyrion realized that negotiation would likely fail unless he had a demonstration of force. Bronn must have come to the same conclusion, for he whipped out his sword in a lazy flourish. "Keep your distance," Bronn said, steel shining in the torchlight. "We have gold, but will not part with it so easily." The bandits advanced with menacing smiles. Tyrion's mind spun. If they were desperate, they'd lunge at the chance for gold. He considered pulling out a coin purse to bribe them, but 6 armed men might decide to kill them anyway. He cursed the luck that had led them to this confrontation so soon after arrival. War-torn cities bred chaos. He squared his shoulders, readying for a fight if it came to that. Then a shout rang out from the other end of the street. Torchlight flared as half a dozen Unsullied soldiers appeared, marching quickly, spears at the ready. The bandits startled, glancing behind them. Tyrion felt a surge of hope. The eunuchs advanced with the discipline of trained warriors, their footsteps in unison. One barked an order in Valyrian. The bandits, outnumbered, or at least facing a disciplined force, backed away, cursing. They slunk off into the darkness, probably to find easier prey. The Unsullied parted ranks, revealing a tall woman with close-cropped hair, clad in practical leather armor. She carried no visible weapons other than a short dagger, but the authority in her posture was evident. Her dark eyes raked over Tyrion and his companions. She barked something in High Valyrian to the lead soldier, then switched to the common tongue for Tyrion's benefit. "I am Missandei of Neath. Who are you, and why do you roam the streets of Meereen at this hour?" "No." Tyrion recognized the name from rumors. Missandei was said to be one of Daenerys Targaryen's closest confidantes, a trusted counselor who spoke many languages. He had not expected to meet her so abruptly. He bent his head in a slight bow. "My lady, I am Tyrion Lannister, though some call me other names. I have come across the sea to parley with your queen." Her eyes widened slightly at the mention of his name. "Tyrion Lannister? I have heard of your family. What could a Lannister possibly want here?" "Nash." Tyrion detected a note of suspicion, perhaps hostility, in her tone. He could hardly blame her. The Lannisters were widely hated for many reasons. but he forced a steady smile. "I bear news from Westeros, and a desire to serve the Queen, if she'll have me. I've parted ways with my family for reasons that are complicated, but I will not trouble you with that in the street." She studied him for a long moment, her expression guarded. Behind her, the Unsullied stood motionless, spears upright. Finally, Missandei nodded. "You risked much to come. That does not mean you are welcome. But you say you wish to speak with the Queen. She will decide your fate." "Dan." "That is all I can ask," Tyrion said with careful humility. He gestured to Bronn and Pod. "My friends are loyal to me and mean no harm. We traveled a great distance under perilous conditions." Missandei turned to the Unsullied officer, a man with a hawk-like face, and spoke in rapid Valyrian. The officer inclined his head, motioning for his soldiers to form a perimeter around Tyrion's group. "We will escort you to the Great Pyramid," Missandei said. "If you try to flee or cause trouble, the Unsullied will kill you. Is that clear?" Tyrion bowed again, ignoring the dryness in his throat. "Perfectly clear. We'll be on our best behavior." With that, they were led away from the deserted street, heading deeper into Myreen's heart. Torch-bearing Unsullied flanked them, a silent escort that demanded compliance with every measured step. Bronn kept his hand off his sword, but Tyrion saw tension in his eyes. Podrick walked stiffly, swallowing convulsively. Tyrion himself felt a swirl of emotions, relief that they had found the Queen's people, and dread at what might happen next. He had pictured seeking out Daenerys, but not being marched under guard through war-scarred streets. They passed the edges of a grand plaza where braziers smoked, columns stood chipped and broken, and a giant statue of a harpy lay toppled. Tyrion guessed this was where Daenerys' forces had torn down the old symbols of oppression. Freedmen lingered in corners, some clutching crude weapons, others huddled around small fires. The presence of the Unsullied kept them from interfering. Soon they reached the base of a colossal pyramid. It loomed overhead, its sides faintly illuminated by torches. Tyrion craned his neck, marveling at the stone steps that ascended to an entrance near the top. Despite the city's turmoil, the pyramid still stood as an enduring testament to ancient wealth. Missandei led them up a winding series of steps inside a wide corridor. Torches flickered along the walls, revealing elaborate carvings of mythical beasts. The climb was exhausting, especially for Tyrion's shorter legs, but he forced himself onward, ignoring the burn in his calves. He had come too far to falter now. At last they emerged into a vast hall with a floor of polished marble. Tall pillars lined the walls, where braziers cast dancing light across the mosaic tiles. The ceiling stretched high overhead, lost in dim shadow. Guards, Unsullied, and a few others in Eastern garb, stood at intervals, watchful. A dais rose at the far end, with a throne set in front of towering windows that offered a distant view of the city lights. Seated on that throne was a figure swathed in pale blue silks, her silver-gold hair unbound, cascading over her shoulders. Even from a distance, Tyrion knew it must be Daenerys Targaryen. She looked younger than he had expected, but her posture held the regal poise of a ruler who had faced war and rebellion. Two men stood near her, advisors or guards. One wore the garb of a Westerosi knight, gray-bearded and grim. The other was lean, with a face creased by years in the field. Missandei advanced, motioning for Tyrion's group to halt a few paces from the throne. The Unsullied fanned out. Tyrion's heart thudded at the sight of Daenerys' violet eyes flicking over him. He had read countless accounts of Targaryen beauty and bearing, but never had he felt it so tangibly. She radiated a presence both commanding and oddly fragile, a young woman burdened by a conqueror's responsibilities. "Your Grace," Missandei said, her voice echoing in the hall. "We found these travelers inside the city walls. This one claims to be Tyrion Lannister." A murmur went through the courtiers. The gray-bearded knight, Sir Barristan Selmy, Tyrion realized with a start, stepped forward, hand on the hilt of his sword. His eyes narrowed. A Lannister. Daenerys regarded Tyrion in silence. The hush grew thick, broken only by the distant rumble of catapults beyond the city and the crackling of braziers. Tyrion took a cautious step forward, though Unsullied spears twitched in warning. He cleared his throat. "Your Grace," he said, pitching his voice carefully to be heard. "I am Tyrion Lannister, though I come not as an envoy of House Lannister. Quite the opposite, in fact. I have risked life and limb to stand here because I believe our interests may align. I seek to aid you in your struggle." Denris' gaze was steady, unwavering. "And why would the imp of House Lannister wish to aid me? Have your father or siblings decided to bow to the rightful queen after all the blood they spilled?" Tyrion suppressed the painful memories her questions stirred. "My father is dead, your Grace. My siblings remain in power, but I am no ally to them. I have parted ways with House Lannister for reasons I will gladly explain if you permit." "Nah." Her expression flickered with something. Curiosity, perhaps. "Sir Barristan, do you vouch for the identity of this dwarf? You served in King's Landing. You must have seen him." Sir Barristan studied Tyrion's face. He nodded slowly. "Yes, your Grace. This is Tyrion Lannister, the youngest son of Lord Tywin. I saw him often. The likeness is unmistakable. Then, at least we know he is who he claims." Daenerys' tone softened not at all. "But that does not answer why you are here, or why I should trust you. The Lannisters destroyed my family, my house. Why would I ever accept help from one of them?" Tyrion felt the weight of that accusation, the echo of Robert's rebellion, the sacking of King's Landing, the murder of Rhaegar's children by the Mountain under Tywin's orders. He bowed his head. "I understand your anger, your Grace. House Lannister has much to answer for. I won't deny it. But I am not my father, nor do I condone his crimes. In fact, I was as much a victim of Tywin's cruelty as anyone." He paused, measuring his next words carefully. "And there is another reason you might wish to hear me out." Daenerys raised a pale eyebrow. "And what reason is that?" Tyrion swallowed. He had rehearsed how to broach his lineage, but the reality of facing her direct scrutiny filled him with a tremor of doubt. Still, he forced himself forward. "Because I believe my father was not Tywin Lannister. I believe I am the son of King Aerys Targaryen, your father." A stunned silence fell. Even Sir Barristan's hand tightened on his sword hilt. Missandei's eyes widened. The lean knight beside Sir Barristan, likely Dario Naharis, Tyrion guessed, let out a low whistle. Daenerys' expression became unreadable. Her violet eyes locked on Tyrion. The tension in the hall spiraled into something almost tangible. At last, Daenerys spoke, voice colder than the blackest night. "That is a bold claim. A lie, more likely. Have you proof?" Tyrion exhaled slowly, his heart hammering. "I have testimonies, letters, diaries that suggest my mother, Joanna Lannister, was forced into the king's bed during her time at court. My father, Tywin, suspected it for many years, which fueled his hatred of me. I would not expect you to take me at my word. I only ask for the chance to present what evidence I have gathered. Should you find it credible, then you might see why I come to you. If I bear the—" He lifted his hands, offering surrender. The hush deepened. Daenerys studied him with an intensity that felt like a knife at his throat. He sensed her mind turning, weighing the impossible. That her father, the mad King Aerys, had sired a bastard on a Lannister lady, was a rumor that, if true, changed the shape of alliances. But it would also conjure the ghosts of old wounds. No one spoke. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Outside, a distant crash of catapults reverberated, reminding them that a war raged just beyond the walls. Finally, Daenerys stood from the throne, stepping down from the dais. She moved closer to Tyrion, flanked by Sir Barristan, her gown trailing across the tiles. She stopped barely a pace away, close enough that he could sense her tension. "If you lie," she said softly, "I will have your head. I will not be manipulated by half-truths and cunning words. I have had my fill of liars." Tyrion inclined his head. "I would expect nothing less. Let me show you the letters I carry. Let me prove my loyalty by deed, if necessary." She paused, her gaze shifting to Bronn and Podrick. "And these men?" "They are my companions," Tyrion said. "They had no knowledge of my lineage until recently. They followed me for gold, or perhaps loyalty. Either way, they pose you no threat. I will vouch for them with my life." Daenerys let out a breath. "Very well." Sir Barristan, have them lodged in the pyramid under guard. I will examine these proofs in due time, and I will judge the truth for myself." Sir Barristan bowed. "As you command, your grace." Thus it was decided. Tyrion exchanged a glance with Bronn and Pod, silently urging them not to resist. The Unsullied surrounded them, and Tyrion offered no complaint. As they were led from the throne room, he felt a tumult of relief, fear, and exhilaration churn in his chest. He had cast his dice at Daenerys' feet, proclaiming a Targaryen lineage that could either bind him to her cause or ensure his death. The goddess of fate had her finger upon the scale, and Tyrion could only wait to see how she pressed it. They were escorted up winding corridors deep within the Great Pyramid, eventually reaching a suite of modest but well-guarded chambers. The Unsullied posted themselves at the doors. Sir Barristan parted with a curt nod, leaving Tyrion, Bronn and Pod behind iron-banded doors that locked from the outside. It was a gilded cage, though better than a dungeon cell. Tapestries covered the walls, and the floor was strewn with rugs of Marinese design. A single high window let in a bit of night air. Bronn let out a shaky laugh, setting his pack on a table. "Well, we're not rotting in chains. That's something." Podrick rubbed his arms, looking anxiously at the door. "Are we prisoners?" "Guests under guard," Tyrion said, half smiling. "There's a difference, albeit small. I've had worse accommodations. At least we aren't in a black cell with rats." "Nay." Bronn gave him a look. "How do you think that went? Telling her you might be her half-brother. Bold move." Tyrion sank onto a cushioned stool, feeling the weight of exhaustion. "It was the only move I had. She despises the Lannisters, and with good cause. If I withheld the truth, she'd assume I was another cunning manipulator from the Westerosi court. By giving her everything, I at least stand a chance of earning her ear. Now we wait to see if she believes me, or if she dismisses me as a liar. Then see." Bronn poured himself a cup of water from a pitcher. "And if she decides you're a liar?" Tyrion's smile was grim. "Then I pray she makes it quick." Pod sat on the edge of a bench, hands folded. "I hope she gives you the chance to show the diaries and letters. It's a lot to take in." Tyrion patted the satchel at his side, which held carefully wrapped copies of the diaries from Casterly Rock, the statements from Dorne, and the letter from Tywin. He had carried them like an amulet of truth. They might be all that stood between him and the headsman's sword. We'll find out soon enough. They spent that night in uneasy rest. Tyrion dozed fitfully, dreaming of dragons circling overhead, sometimes breathing fire on Lannister banners, other times turning to gaze at him with molten eyes. When dawn light seeped through the window, they were roused by a knock at the door. An unsullied soldier opened it, and Missandei entered, bearing a tray of simple breakfast fare: flatbread, boiled eggs, fruit. Tyrion offered a polite bow. "My thanks, Missandei. I was not expecting personal service from one so esteemed." "Mention down." She inclined her head in return. "Her Grace has asked me to speak with you while she attends to matters in the city. I will take your documents if you wish, or if you prefer to explain them yourself, you may come before the Queen this evening." Tyrion hesitated. Part of him thought it wise to let Missandei see the diaries first, so that Daenerys might receive a preliminary assessment from someone she trusted. But he feared losing control of the narrative if these writings circulated out of his presence. "I would prefer to present them in person," he said carefully. "The evidence is delicate, and context matters. No offense meant." "None taken," Missandei said. "The Queen anticipated this. She will hold an audience tonight in a private chamber. For now, I must ask you to remain here under guard. The city is volatile, and your presence would raise questions we cannot yet answer. Understand that you are not free to wander." Tyrion nodded, accepting the constraint. "Understood. May I ask, how fares the war?" The blockade outside the harbor was considerable. Are you under siege? Missandei's lips pressed into a thin line. Yes. Yunkai and their allies have encircled us by land and sea. They demand a return of slavery in Meereen, which the Queen will never grant. We hold the walls, but supplies dwindle. Skirmishes occur daily. Thus far, the Queen's dragons have been reluctant to fight. They are difficult to control. Tyrion's heart stirred at the mention of dragons. It was one thing to read about them in books, quite another to know they were real, living creatures in the city. He wondered what it would be like to stand before one, especially if the rumors of Targaryen blood in his veins were true. But he kept that curiosity to himself. I see. Then I wish the Queen success in her struggle. I pray we can be of service. Missandei studied him a moment longer. The Queen will decide that. Eat, rest. I will return for you at sunset. She departed, and Tyrion stared after her, shoulders tense. The hours that followed stretched in dull monotony. They picked at the food, drank water, and occasionally dozed. Bronn grumbled about wanting to see the city's famed fighting pits. Pod asked Tyrion whether Daenerys would truly listen. Tyrion gave non-committal answers, pacing the chamber to shake off his nervous energy. When sunset finally came, Missandei reappeared. Ser Barristan Selmy was with her, the old knight's face grave but not unkind. He gestured for Tyrion to follow, leading them down a labyrinth of corridors into a smaller audience room, less grand than the throne hall but still imposing. Marble pillars supported a high ceiling painted with scenes of winged harpies and serpents. Torches flickered in sconces, casting long shadows. A single dais stood at the far end, flanked by two of Daenerys' trusted guards, a dark-skinned warrior with a spear, Grey Worm, Tyrion recalled from rumor, and the flamboyant Selzor Daario Naharis. Daenerys herself sat on a simple chair set atop the dais, wearing a pale gown that caught the torchlight in shifting blues and silvers. Her hair was braided back, revealing the planes of her face. She looked at Tyrion as he approached, Missandei and Barristan at his side, Bronn and Pod staying a respectful distance behind. Tyrion bowed low. "Your Grace," he said softly, heart fluttering. She gestured to a low table set near the foot of the dais. "Place your evidence there." "Show me." Tyrion gently laid out the diaries, letters, and statements. Several parchments from Dorne, the diaries from Casterly Rock, the letter Tywin had written but never sent. He took a breath, beginning to explain their contents. He spoke of Lady Joanna's rumored visits to Aerys' chambers, the date of his conception, Tywin's suspicion and rage, and finally how he had collected these documents after discovering the hints from Varys in King's Landing. He recited each relevant passage, occasionally pausing to let Daenerys examine the text. Missandei stood close, reading the Valyrian translations where needed, while Ser Barristan listened intently. As Tyrion spoke, Daenerys' face remained impassive, but tension radiated from her. Only when the diaries described Aerys' brutality and Joanna's fear did Tyrion see a flicker of sorrow or anger in her eyes. She questioned him at intervals, pressing for details. Tyrion answered as best he could, aware that any slip might doom him. When he finished, an uneasy hush fell. Daenerys turned to Ser Barristan. "You serve my father, sir. Do you recall any rumors of Lady Joanna Lannister?" Barristan's face looked haunted. "I recall that King Aerys grew infatuated with Lord Tywin's wife, though Tywin kept it hidden. There were whispers that the king had forced himself upon her, but never proof. If these documents are genuine, it supports what many suspected." Daenerys exhaled softly. "Then, it is possible." She looked again at Tyrion, her gaze heavy. "If this is true, you would be my half-brother. The bastard son of a father I barely knew. A father many called Mad King. I don't know whether that would increase my trust in you or not." "Then thou." Tyrion's chest tightened, but he forced a wry note. "I understand, Your Grace. Our father, if he was indeed my father, committed unspeakable acts. I do not claim his madness as my heritage, but neither do I deny the darkness in the Targaryen name. If you wish to test my loyalty, I will do whatever you ask." She studied him, pressing her lips together. You speak like a courtier who knows all the right words. But what do you truly want from me? A crown? Power? Or is this a ploy to undermine my cause from within? Ben? Tyrion's throat felt parched. He drew a breath. What I want is a chance to help shape a new Westeros, free from the cruelty I endured under Tywin Lannister, and free from the cruelty you and your ancestors endured. If my blood is Targaryen, I have more reason than ever to see you succeed. For your victory would vindicate all that was destroyed. If my blood is not Targaryen, I still choose your side over Cersei's or any other pretenders. You freed slaves, He paused. As for a crown, no. I have no interest in ruling. I've seen too much of the madness that comes with power. But I can be your advisor, your hand if you wish it, your spy master, your master of coin, whatever use you see. I have knowledge of Westeros, of its great houses, of the cunning ways of King's Landing. I can help you navigate it. Daario Naharis snorted, crossing his arms. A dwarf as hand of the queen? I've seen stranger, I suppose? Grey Worm said nothing, his expression unreadable. Daenerys rose from her seat and stepped closer. I know well the cunning of King's Landing. It killed my father. And yet you come from that same place. Tell me why I should trust your cunning not to betray me. You are still of House Lannister by name. Thou. Tyrion bowed his head, choosing words carefully. Because I have no other home. My house despises me, and I them. I have done things, killed my own father. For one, things that ensure I can never return to them. I might have chosen exile in obscurity, but I heard rumors of you, of dragons reborn, of a queen who breaks chains. If I am to find purpose, I would find it here, not in a lonely hovel somewhere. I was always an outcast. Let me stand with you, and I will do whatever is in my power to aid your cause. Ben? Daenerys' eyes flicked to the diaries on the table, then back to Tyrion. For a moment, she seemed younger than her years, burdened by decisions that might shape history. At length, she spoke. Ser Barristan, do you find any evidence of forgery in these documents? He leaned over them again, scanning lines of text. They appear genuine, Your Grace. The seals, the script. If this is a ruse, it's elaborate. She nodded curtly. And Missandei, your assessment of his sincerity. Missandei studied Tyrion for a moment, then dipped her head. He speaks honestly, as best I can tell. His Valyrian is sufficient to follow the references. He has not contradicted himself. Daenerys' gaze returned to Tyrion, drilling into him. A long silence passed. Tyrion felt sweat bead on his brow. This was the critical moment. If she refused him, all his plans and hopes ended in a sword thrust or a lonely corridor. He forced himself to meet her eyes without flinching, though inside he quivered with fear and anticipation. At last, Daenerys inhaled. Very well, Tyrion. I will allow you to remain in my court under watch for the time being. You may advise me, earn my trust. If your counsel proves valuable, if your loyalty endures, then perhaps I'll name you something more official. Do not mistake this for acceptance of your claims in full. I need time to weigh what it means to have another of my blood in the world, and whether I can rely on you. A surge of relief almost made Tyrion sag. He bowed deeply. You have my gratitude, Your Grace. I will do everything in my power not to disappoint. Then, she glanced at Grey Worm. See that they have suitable quarters in the pyramid, close enough that I can call on Tyrion when needed. They will be guarded, of course. Grey Worm nodded, beckoning two Unsullied to escort Tyrion and his companions. Daario gave Tyrion a speculative look, but said nothing. Ser Barristan quietly gathered the diaries and statements. Daenerys watched Tyrion go with an expression Tyrion could not entirely decipher. Equal parts curiosity, doubt, and a flicker of something else. Maybe the faint hope of not being alone in her Targaryen heritage. As the Unsullied led Tyrion away, he felt a riot of emotions swirling through him. He had succeeded in taking the first step. Daenerys had not cast him out or executed him. But the road ahead was uncertain, lined with the pitfalls of trust, betrayal, and blood. If she truly was his half-sister, what then? Could she embrace him as family, or would she see in him the shadow of their mad father? He recalled the Targaryen words, fire and blood. He could almost taste them on his tongue. Fire for the passion, the power, the impetus to reshape the world. Blood for the lineage that bound or cursed them both. They were not out of danger. Beyond the pyramid's walls, Yonkai's forces sharpened their blades. Even within Meereen, factions conspired. Daenerys needed allies, trustworthy counsel, and perhaps the knowledge of Westerosi politics that Tyrion could provide. If he played this right, he might help her claim the Iron Throne, and, in so doing, forge a new legacy for the Targaryen name. Or he might fail spectacularly, undone by intrigues or suspicion. Either way, he was no longer an aimless wanderer. He had joined a grand cause that might burn the world anew or save it. That night, Tyrion sat in the modest chamber provided for him, watching torchlight dance on the walls, thinking of dragons. In the distance, he heard a thunderous roar, like some monstrous beast exhaling frustration. He wondered if it was one of Daenerys' dragons, confined somewhere in the pyramid's depths. The thought sent a shiver across his skin. If the dragons accepted him, would that be proof of his Targaryen blood? Or would they incinerate him without a second thought? He closed his eyes, remembering how Tywin once spat, "You are no son of mine." He had not understood, in that moment, just how literal those words might have been. Now he did. Perhaps tomorrow, or the next day, Daenerys might ask him to stand before her dragons as a test. He did not relish the idea. But if that was what it took to prove himself, he would not run. He had run all his life, in one way or another. Now, at last, he stood on the precipice of a fate beyond his wildest imagination. He inhaled the hot, still air of Meereen. War hammered at the gates, and the Targaryen queen sat uneasy on her throne, uncertain of her next move. Tyrion realized he, too, was uncertain. Yet he felt a spark inside, an ember of possibility that might flare to brilliant fire. Perhaps the dwarf lion would yet become a dragon in truth, and the name Tyrion Targaryen would mean something in a realm that had scorned him for so long. For now, he waited, prepared to give counsel if Daenerys called for it. Dawn would come, and with it, decisions that might shape the fate of Meereen, the fate of Westeros, and the fate of the last scion of House Targaryen, or scions, if Tyrion was indeed one of them. In the swirling darkness of the night, he found a small smile on his lips. Let the game begin, he thought. For once, I hold a hand worth playing.